Is a liberal arts degree worth it? Learn that and more with Richard Detweiler.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Richard Detweiler. He wrote the book, The Evidence Liberal Arts Needs. And in this book, he argues that liberal arts is, in fact, a quality education. And I think I agree with him. Certainly for some students, liberal arts is the way to go. Of course, liberal arts, we see it in the comment sections of underwater basket weaving as a major that families should avoid, and you should go into something that leads you directly to a job, not philosophy, not history. Take engineering or take nursing where you get trained for a job. I think that's a legitimate argument for some students where they, in fact, do need training for a quality job. But I think many other students, especially the go-getters out there, the ones that are going to do well no matter what they study, might actually benefit from studying something a little more broadly and then figuring out how that broad education can benefit the world, whether that's working with a company or start founding a business or coming up with a new idea. I think there's a great benefit where you learn lots of different things, and occasionally you might apply something you learned in one area and use it somewhere else. Steve Jobs talked about his calligraphy class being something where he learned the aesthetics, and he used it a lot when he was reviewing Apple products and trying to figure out how do we make this look good for the potential purchaser. All right. So again, my philosophy, I think liberal arts is a good fit for some and not others. And of course, listen to this interview and we'll get into a lot of the great details around what liberal arts is and isn't and how it works. And so if you have a student thinking about liberal arts, I think this is a great interview that you should be listening to. As always, show notes are available at our website. Just look up this episode 156. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview. Today, I'm having a conversation with Rick Detweiler. He is the author of The Evidence Liberal Arts Needs. Welcome, Rick.
Thank you. It's good to be with you, Brad.
All right. So you wrote a book, obviously, about liberal arts, and I really want to dive into it and so forth. But can you tell us a little bit about your background and kind of what led up to the ideas that you're going to write a book about this topic?
Well, I grew up in Southern California, actually. My dad, a college graduate, my mom not. When I was selecting colleges, I was most interested in going to a place that seemed like an interesting place to be. So I chose a campus on the ocean because I thought that was pretty neat. What I didn't know or understand is I was, in fact, choosing a liberal arts college. And that didn't mean anything to me at the time. And in fact, it wasn't until probably many years later that I really began to recognize that. My wife and I went in the Peace Corps together, lived on a tiny little island in the Pacific, and with no electricity, no cars, not much of anything that we think of as a part of contemporary life. But that gave me also a chance to reflect on what I thought I might want to do with my life. And that led me to graduate school in social psychology, went to Princeton, and then thinking about what I wanted to do with that degree, considered going back into the Peace Corps to be a country director and had that on my plate. But our firstborn child was due about the time I needed to be there, and I knew it was a place with no health care. So rather at the last minute, ended up going to work at what turned out to be a liberal arts college. And my focus at that time was on my scholarship. But as I worked there and worked with my faculty colleagues, began to see the excitement they have and ultimately the excitement I had about engaging students in thinking about not only the subject that they were studying, but about their life ahead. And that led me into proposing lots of innovations at that university. Somebody needed to run those innovative new programs. And so I ended up becoming a college administrator, a vice president, ultimately president of another college, and then the president of an association of liberal arts colleges in the Midwest. So with the accident of choosing a liberal arts college at the beginning, having a very specialized degree, graduate degree and then going into the work environment. Spent my life then working in environments that really cared about students and their growth and development. And as I got far along in all that, began to say, well, we all talk about liberal arts education, but it's really confusing about what liberal arts means. And does it really make a difference, or is that really a good choice? So that led into the work that's reported in my book on the evidence liberal arts needs. So that's a quick thumbnail.
Right. And if you think it's confusing for those of you in the industry, imagine what it's like for the families looking in that are saying, maybe this is the first time I'm sending a child
Yes.
off to college, or maybe the parents have a degree of some sort, maybe they don't. And of course, many parents have preconceived notions and so forth and so on. So I guess let's start there. So when we talk about liberal arts in the book, you mentioned there's a couple different aspects to it. One is curriculum, one is teaching style. So can you kind of expand, our knowledge on what liberal arts is all about?
Yes, and you're absolutely right that liberal arts is talked about in very confused and inconsistent ways, both in higher education and certainly more broadly in the public and legislators and all of those kinds of things. People tend to think that liberal arts means studying things that have no practical value. So, philosophy, maybe religion or history or those kinds of subjects, and that's really what it's all about. And that's actually not what liberal arts is about. That orientation comes from the understanding that some have that it comes originally from ancient Greece and developed over the years. But when I began to look at that history myself and understand what was really going on with liberal arts education that makes it different, it became clear that there are two aspects of what it means to have a liberal arts education. One part of it is what you study, and that tends to be non-vocational degrees and a broader span of study and the development of intellectual skills. So that's the content side. But as important, and in fact, it turned out to be even more important, is that it happens in the words that I talk about in the book, an authentic educational community. What's that mean? That means that faculty know students not just in a classroom, but outside the classroom. They know students by their first name. They actively engage with students in their thinking, not as part of a big lecture where everybody gets some information dumped into their brain, but that development of the students' thinking is really critically important, and that students have good relationships with other students and they exchange their thinking and debate and those kinds of things. So it's that context of a real educational community that involves people inside and outside the classroom, combined with a content of study that tends to be broader and engaging of one's thinking. So those are the two aspects that turned out to be characteristic of liberal arts education as it developed and evolved over literally millennia, and as it has been implemented in the U.S. since the early 1800s, in fact.
Right. So as a parent, my antenna went up a little bit around not only is it, taking a breadth of knowledge, but it's also the in the classroom and outside of the classroom. So I think that is important to understand that. How do we know if a college delivers that other half, which is the outside the classroom
Yes.
piece of it, where, it's not just sitting in a lecture, So obviously the content of a broad education could be memorize this and regurgitate it to me, or it could be a much deeper knowledge and understanding and application and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, and you put your finger on what it turns out has really long-term impact, and that is, you can get facts anywhere. You can get it today on the internet. You don't need to go to college. So the facts you can find all kinds of places. The question is, where do you really get the added value that has an impact on one's life? And that turns out to be the opportunity to engage one's thinking and ideas about subjects and life more broadly and big issues facing humanity and all of those kinds of things outside of the classroom. So it's that educational context. That's nowhere to be found in U.S. news rankings. It doesn't give you that insight. There are some college guides that try to give you a bit of that, but most do not. And so what I'd say is that it requires digging a little deeper than the marketing kinds of information that colleges and universities typically provide, and asking questions of students on that campus, of faculty on that campus, really asking questions about the nature of that broader educational experience, because that's where life impact really comes from.
Right. I mean, so some of the stuff you're describing reminds me of I'm going to date myself, the old movie Dead Poet Society,
Yes.
where a bunch of young people and Robin Williams, I don't remember the name of his character, but, do stuff together. And in the end, they have this enlightening educational experience, which leads, if that's what you're going to get out of college, it seems pretty obvious. Like, yeah, that seems like a pretty good route to take especially for the right kids, right? The ones that like to think deeply and like to get involved in all that stuff. That seems like a great path.
Yeah. But so let me, if you don't mind my interrupting there, Brad, because this is not an education just for people who like to think deeply. So if you think about the life that's going to be ahead of a 18-year-old today and their lifetime ahead, it's going to be a lifetime of constant change and constant learning. There's the belief now is people will change their jobs, maybe 10 or 12 times over their career. And the people who are successful, and again, I have data that supports this idea, are the people who learn while in college, if they haven't already been there, to begin thinking a bit more deeply, to be asking good questions, to be excited about learning new things that maybe are completely outside their area of interest or expertise. So it doesn't mean that they shouldn't pursue something that they like, but they also should become excited about thinking and learning more broadly, because that's what's going to pay off over their lifetime. Jobs that are going to be the important ones a decade or two from now probably don't even exist today. So how do you prepare for that? Well, you learn to think and you learn to exchange ideas and be engaged with both educated professors, but your peers who are learning along the way with you. So I would say it's not just for that those people that go to college with that inquiring mind, but that it's a talent that every person who wants to be successful in their lifetime needs to develop.
Right. And I would agree that it's, again, a skill that is valuable and should be developed. But are there the kids out there that just aren't ready for it, perhaps? I picture the kids sitting in the class and raising their hand all the time and saying, is this going to be on the test? It's like, no, this is a general discussion, and where this discussion is going to take us wherever we take us. So no, this can't be on the test because we don't even know what we're talking about till the class is over. That disconnect of just tell me what I need to know so I can know it and I can be done here and go off and get a good career.
Yeah. And so I would say two things about that. One is, if all you care about is that very first job and maximizing your income, then that's exactly the way to approach it. But in the spirit of the liberal arts, conversations are not just directionless or mindless. It's the professor having the opportunity and interest in engaging that individual student. And so in class time, that it may be far more structured, but that there is out of class time conversation as well, in which the professor really is understanding the student and where they're coming from. And if they are approaching college in exactly the way you described, well, at a liberal arts based institution, that professor gets to know individual students and is going to engage their thinking in ways that connect their thinking and their life aspirations, whatever they happen to be, with bigger questions and bigger issues, and help to make them intrigued with the process of learning and change and thinking, and that will pay off over their lifetime.
Right. Absolutely. So another point of your book was, and we touched on it already a little bit, but again, liberal arts being a teaching style, a curriculum, more and broader than either you're a liberal arts college or you're not, kind of, bucket A or bucket B kind of thing.
That's accurate.
And all this stuff is on a continuum. So again, we've kind of talked about, what's a good fit for a particular student and that type of thing. Do you think there's colleges out there that, and again, the stories we see on TV or in movies, that kind of that aha moment where somebody, gave me the time and the effort and kind of took me from the closed-minded ideas that I had and expanded my knowledge and all that type of thing. I mean, do you feel like that's a mission statement of particular colleges, or is that, again, as a parent thinking about it, if you had the kid that, man, they just need to go out and experience the world, and, they don't know what they want to be when they grow up. And I see this a lot too, right? Is they love everything or they hate everything, right? It's like, I hate math, I hate science, I hate school, I hate everything. Well, what do you want to do when you grow up? I don't know. Or the other end of it is, I love music, math is fun, but I like philosophy, and I can't pick a major because now you're going to say I have to do this, and then it means I can't do that. And I don't want to pick one and then say no to all the rest because of, that's what's in their mind, right? Is
Yes.
if I pick a couple of these, then the other ones are off the list, and then I don't get to do them. So we have those two different undecided. Is the liberal arts a good solution for those problems, or a bad solution for those problems?
I would actually say it's the best solution for those problems. At a liberal arts-based institution, there will be the insistence that a student do some degree of studying outside of their area of passion, their major area. And that span of study, I mean, the best predictor of success over the long term, over one's career in my research, based on 1,000 college graduates of all kinds of colleges and universities, the best single predictor of success, earning more money and being in a higher position, is taking more than half your courses outside of your major. So that pays off for the reasons we've already talked about. It's a changing world. And those people who have been introduced to lots of ways of thinking about life and knowledge are the ones who tend to do better over the long term. For the student who's really focused on a particular, or is unfocused then, a liberal arts institution will typically not require declaration of a major until as late as the junior year. And so the student has an opportunity to explore broader areas of knowledge and find something that intrigues them enough that they really want to study it in greater depth. And so there is both the breadth of study and the focused areas of study. One of the dilemmas with specialized training, if you go to an engineering school, then they end up oftentimes having so many requirements within engineering that there really is little opportunity to study outside that very focused professional area of study. And so one of the fundamental assumptions or beliefs of those who believe in liberal arts education, and by the way, since the early 1800s, all of American higher education has been based on this idea, is that specialized training should happen as your second post high school degree. So first, you should become this more engaged, thinking, growing person that prepares you for a life of and careers of change. And if there's something that you really want to specialize in, then go to graduate school in engineering or medicine or chemistry or whatever that more specialized thing is. But that should happen after one has a broader education to begin with.
Right. So again, as a parent looking at college, there's that, the obvious quote unquote liberal arts colleges that declare themselves as such. I think there's a lot now of colleges that might be a little more technical in nature that have realized that double majors or cross professions or public-private partnerships and all these ways to kind of expand beyond just, again, these are the facts, memorize them all, and now you get to graduate. They're realizing, in your book, you mentioned that there's a survey out there. These are what employers are looking for, and liberal arts tends to deliver it. I mean, I would argue that people on the other side of the aisle are also working hard to deliver it, at least the ones that are aware of it. And again, I think maybe there's also some institutions that have said, this is the way we've always done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. And we're never changing. And we're going to resist any sort of idea along those lines. And I think to their detriment, in my opinion. But anyway, and then I think there's some engineering schools that might say, hey, let's not get too focused on any particular thing. And I think engineering itself is broad enough, right? Because you can't possibly learn what you're going to do in your job in, say, mechanical engineering or electrical engineering, because you don't know if you're going to work in batteries or cars, so you're not getting you're getting the broad, almost a liberal technical education. I don't know how you would say that, but how is that different than the liberal? Again, you go to engineering school, you learn all about physics and math and stuff that's relevant to how the world works, how the physical world works, let's say. So that's kind of a broad, and then you're going to go to work for Ford and learn suspensions, or you're going to go to work for NASA and learn rockets, or you're going to go sell MRI machines for GE, and completely different knowledge base, all that kind of stuff. You probably didn't learn anything in school that's relevant to MRI machines or rockets, at least except the very highest, basic level of this is how they work, kind of. How is that any different or the same than a true liberal arts? And again, the reason I'm bringing this up is there's a whole bunch of engineers that are listening that are saying they didn't experience a liberal arts education as labeled anyway. They didn't go to the liberal arts college, although I guess there are, and we'll talk about that next, but I think there are some liberal arts colleges that do offer engineering.
That's accurate.
So we'll get into those differences in a minute, but I guess back to the original question around, engineering is kind of broad. It doesn't really train you for a job either.
Right.
How is that the same or different than a liberal arts degree per se?
Well, your point is exactly right. But if one is going to be prepared for this world of change, and one is only thinking about that within a pretty narrow domain, that is, and by the way, my dad was an engineer, so a mechanical engineer, and then became a hydraulic engineer over his career. But that training then is within a very limited context. And to what degree is that also having you understand the broader issues facing humanity and the implications of what one is doing for the challenges and opportunities we face as humans? So the idea of a liberal arts education is not to be anti-engineering by any means, but to say, as one is educated in a specialization, one also needs to be thinking about broader issues and opportunities that are just outside one's area of specialization. So having perspectives from history and from philosophy and from religion and from sociology, etc., that widens one's thinking. Steve Jobs, who did not himself actually graduate from college, he credits a course he took at a liberal arts college with what became Apple Computer and the Macintosh. And it was a course in calligraphy. And he learned about, drawing things in artistic shape. And that, he said, created a perspective on what was a technical life that he lived. But who would have thought that a person who ends up doing computer engineering, as he did, should be taking a course in calligraphy? Nobody would think of that. But that fundamentally changed the way he approached the whole technical issue that became his life. Similarly, Bill Gates talks about his partnership with a liberally educated person who brought broader perspectives into what became Microsoft. It's why surveys of employers that you mentioned earlier on, they look for, this broader problem-solving, inquiring, flexibility, looking at things from outside the perspectives of one's job, ability to communicate and work well with other people. Those are things that actually don't just take a particular field of work and kind of make it mechanically go forward and slightly improve it, but which bring the kinds of change and opportunity that make a difference, both professionally and for our society.
Right. So I guess before I forget, let's go back to some liberal arts colleges offer an engineering degree. So
Yes.
How do we rectify that? I mean, now we're saying essentially that somebody in this camp is doing the other camp's work. I mean,
yeah. So if you go just to an engineering school, so you're going to a big university, enrolling in the engineering program, and you're taking engineering courses, that's one thing. There are also a few universities, but generally smaller institutions that are liberal arts in basis, and where you also can get that Bachelor of Science in Engineering. Generally speaking, those institutions require a couple of years of study more broadly, in addition to the 2 or 3 years of study in engineering. So they match them or mate them together into a degree rather than having the student from the time they arrive study those specialized courses. Many smaller liberal arts institutions have what they call 3-2 programs. So you spend 3 years at the liberal arts college and have automatic transfer into a engineering school where you then do the 2 years of specialization, having taken the math and those things that are required in engineering as part of your liberal arts education, but then the specialization comes later. So that's a difference. I have my nephew was interested in, and he's in an engineering school now. He was interested in combining engineering and psychology. And he thought, gee, the best place for me to do that is I'll go to a big university where they have both an engineering program and a psychology program. Having gotten there, he's found that the engineering requirements in the engineering school means he can't take any psychology, or he can take a course, but that's really it, because they have so many requirements within psychology. Had he gone to a probably smaller or liberal arts oriented school, he would have been able to combine those, because they try to keep a balance between those broader non-professional type of courses and the professional courses.
Right. So, I think there's also this juxtaposition of the narrow specialist that knows a subject really deep, and before we hit record, I said, there's the hand surgeon that knows everything, and and that's his thing. And that, he's the guy you want if you're getting surgery on your hand. You don't want a general surgeon. He knows that's all he does every day. Theoretically, he should be the guy, right? And
Yes.
Then there's the general doctor whose job it is to say, I see some correlations that, maybe what's going on has something to do with your hand, and maybe you need surgery. So there's kind of those analogies like that. In today's world, is it wrong or right? Or how do you know if it's, and I guess my opinion, I'm going to answer my own question. I think it's wrong and right per individual, not everybody should do this or everybody should do that. I think it's, it's based on, where you want to go in life. But if you wanted to be the hand specialist or the general doctor, or if you wanted to be, again, deep into engineering and know all there is to know about electric cars, or how do parents deal with that? Again, a typical scenario where I see a lot of struggle is when mom and dad are technically trained, they're nurses or doctors or engineers, and their kids are undecided and saying, I just want to go take this and that and this. And dad's first response is, $100,000. And what are you going to do with it?
Mm-hmm.
And the student rightfully says, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, that doesn't sit well with
Mm-hmm.
dad.
Uh-huh.
So we're at a log jam. What's your opinion there? It's like, dad, get over it, or dad, ask these questions, and these are the questions. And if you get a lot of yeses to these kinds of questions, then back off, and it's probably, it'll be fine. Or ask these questions, if you get a lot of no's, well, then you're probably right. You maybe should steer them away from liberal arts. Is there a test?
So let me, there's not a test, but I do not disagree that there are some people for whom that kind of specialization is what they ought to do, and that's where their passion is, and that's a good thing. And by the way, that could be a plumber or a mechanic as well as being a hand surgeon.
Right.
And if that's where the passion is, that's wonderful, and our world needs all kinds of people. But let me back up one step to say that there's a fundamental difference between education as it is offered in Europe and higher education as it is offered in the United States. And what's interesting is that globally, the United States approach is believed to be superior, that the outcomes from American higher education are actually far better than the European approach. In European education, when you go to what we call college or university, you enter to be specialized. So you study medicine or dentistry or engineering or whatever it is, and you just enter and you're doing that specialization from the beginning. In the early 1800s in the US, when this was going on in Europe, which was new, it used to always be liberal arts education in Europe, and then the advanced degree was the specialized degree. In the early 1800s, faculty at Yale actually asked the question, should we do it like the Europeans are now beginning to do it? And it turned out Europeans went that way strongly. Or should we see the first college degree, the bachelor's degree, as the kind of education we need in our society in order for the individual and society to be successful, with specialization happening afterward? And they concluded that the individual and American society are better off by having everybody have that broader liberal arts-based education first, and then specialization would occur. So how do you become a physician? You get a BA degree, and then you go to medical school at which you specialize, and then you may specialize more than that even through a residency. And it's that process that leads to a person becoming a physician. And in fact, undergraduate pre-medicine, pre-med, is not a major. It's just assuring that a student, regardless of whatever major they take, has enough of the biology and chemistry and physics and those kinds of things that will prepare them for med school. And when you look at medical school enrollments, in fact, the highest percentage admission rates tend to be for non-science majors. Medical schools who see a philosophy major or a history major who's also taken the biology and so forth, those tend to have a higher admission rate than the person who's just majors in biology, because they know that having physicians who are educated to think more broadly and creatively actually end up tending to be more successful, not only in med school, but longer term. Similarly, now in the US, if you want to be a nurse, you can get an undergraduate nursing degree. If it happens at a liberal arts-based institution, then they're going to require substantial study outside of the discipline. But you can also get just a bachelor's degree at American institution and get a master's in nursing, which you actually enter at a higher level in the nursing profession than if you have a bachelor's degree. So the notion is this broader span of study actually better prepares one for whatever one's specialization. And that has been for a long time the American approach to education. That approach has been eroding in the US with the growth of specialization requiring more courses in a major or in a profession. And I think that's not been good either for the long-term success of individuals or for society. But I also want to go back to the beginning of our conversation to say, as important or more important than the specific thing a student studies, if you care about long-term success or leadership or living a fulfilled life or any one of a number of kinds of longer-term life outcomes, having an education in a place where faculty know individual students and spend time with them outside of class time, where students interact with each other in a real sense of community and exchange of thinking, et cetera, that's where the power really comes from.
Right.
And that's just more than twice as likely to happen if a student attends a smaller institution than if one attends a larger institution. That's just, it's not that it can't happen at a larger place, but it's much less likely to happen at a larger place. Students going to have to work really hard to get that professor to pay attention to them outside of class time if that professor is at an institution with 15 or 20,000 or more students. If the institution has 2,000 or 5,000, it's far more likely to happen.
Right. I think a couple of thoughts there. One is, and it's also more likely to happen if you ask the right questions while you're shopping around for colleges to figure out,
yes,
does this type of thing exist? And it's also much more likely to happen if your student intentionally seeks it out, no matter where they are.
Yes, that's absolutely right. And that's where the college guides, most of them don't give you much insight. And so if the list of, colleges a student is interested in and mom and dad are looking at gets down to a half a dozen or so, then it's possible to do some follow-up inquiry, which, we do with all kinds of things. You don't go, some people buy a house sight unseen. Most people want to go look at it, see the neighborhood, and develop a better sense of what really goes on there before they decide to invest in a house. They should be likewise doing similar things before they decide to invest in a college education. And on that list of concerns should be, is this a place that really will compellingly involve my child in the whole educational experience outside of the class as well as inside the class?
Right. Now, right. And I think there's I think some of this stuff, the whole liberal arts idea, it's not, or it doesn't have to be solely the college's responsibility. I mean, parents in general can themselves read widely, with their kids when they're 7, and then all of a sudden when the kids are 15, they read widely on their own accord because that's what they figure that's how it's done. They don't know any better. And then from there, they can continue to have lots of interests, and they can go off to college and study engineering and play music on the side and read philosophy on the side and go to debate club on the side and do all this stuff and essentially get to the same place.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a big challenge around that where the whole discussion around highly educated parents have children that have this leg up, whether it's, and again, is it unfair? Yes. But it's also a fact that because parents understand, they tend to do these types of things more often, right? I have an engineering background. All the time I'm talking about my kids, well, it's not magic that thing moves on its own. What do you think? Why do you think that moves?
Mm-hmm.
And they have to think about it a little bit. And, and then when it stops working, I let them tear it apart and see what's wrong with it. And then usually it's done because they're not getting it back together. But it was broken anyway, so who cares? But what do you think are some liberal arts parenting on purpose things that you might do?
Yeah. Well, and I'll respond to that question, but just let me, before I talk about that, just say that in this same research, even those young people who came out of families, low-income families, where it's less likely those kinds of experiences you just talked about will have happened, those young people were 2 to 3 times more impacted by having a college experience in this educational community than were those who entered it better prepared for it. So it's not too late. If you haven't been doing that with your kids, then that's particularly important to get them into this kind of educational experience because the impact is even greater.
And the correlation to that is, and if you've been doing a good job of it as a parent, you can rest easier if you don't choose liberal arts because, again, your student might do the liberal arts ideas on their own. They may seek out professors and quote unquote argue with them because they think it's fun. They think that's the way it's done, right? They've seen Dead Poets Society. They've argued with you all day long about various philosophical things, and they'll just continue and,
keep at it.
They'll do it for fun, or they'll do it because whereas, again, as you mentioned, getting somebody that aha moment, so to speak, getting them out there where someone does challenge them.
Yes.
I think there's some parents out there that don't realize that, this whole concept of, well, think about it and do it intentionally instead of by accident.
Right. Yes. And we have 3 children. One attended a prestigious research university. The other 2 attended liberal arts colleges. The one piece of advice we gave to the one who went to the research university was some class you take, if you find the class interesting, then write down a question from the lecture because lectures are big. You tend not to have much give and take with the professor. And that professor probably has at least one office hour a week. Walk in that professor's office and ask a question or read something that they published and go in and ask a question. And so she developed that liberal arts experience because she was willing to take that initiative. The 2 that went to liberal arts-based institutions, it happened automatically. They didn't need to be encouraged to take that kind of step. It's hard to avoid it when you're at a smaller liberal arts-based institution. You have to work at it if you go to a bigger research-oriented institution. And as you've said, parents can work on that throughout a lifetime. And if that's something they still have the opportunity to do because their kids aren't old enough to be rejecting their conversation, then it's, asking questions of why and, what do you think if our society does this or if science discovers that, what's going to happen to the way we live or, so ask those kinds of probing questions. As you say, if something, you have a mechanical thing, well, take it apart and figure out how it works and let's talk about it. So any of those kinds of things that link areas of knowledge and understanding, because that's what the future is all about. It's not chemistry, it's biochemistry, or it's linking areas of knowledge and understanding that really make the difference.
Right. And I want to step back now. The story that your daughter, just kind of drive the point home where you said your daughter, went and asked questions. It's likely then that professor needed an undergrad to do some project or something. And who did they pick? They picked your daughter. And every other student in that class is saying, she's lucky that the professor picked her. And it's like, well, you could look at it. No, there was no luck involved there. I mean,
that's absolutely right.
She made her own luck in that she engaged and she went above and beyond. And
that's right. And the professor responded to that. There was no question.
Right, exactly. And again, I don't know what happened with your daughter. I don't know that she was picked for anything in particular, but that's the kind of stuff that happens all the time where talking with your students and just asking them, are they taking advantage of, one of the things that colleges are getting more expensive, but they're also offering a whole lot more services and a whole lot more benefits. And there's tutoring and counseling and all kinds of stuff. And it's like, are you taking advantage of all that stuff you're paying for? Unfortunately, you're forced to pay for it. So you may as well at least take advantage of it. And I think certainly most students don't have no idea of all the services, and most parents probably don't either. And it's so ubiquitous now that it's almost not a differentiation point, because they all have career services and they all have resume writing and they all have, and some might do it better than others. So it might be a slight differentiation from one school to the next. But just asking those questions to realize how much there is. And again, and taking advantage of all that is, kind of the bigger picture thing again.
Yes. And I think it's really important for parents to understand that don't think about those opportunities as services as deficits. Think about opportunities to better prepare one for life ahead, which is going to be change and unpredictable and requiring all kinds of things. So the idea of talking to a professor outside of class time is not to just become more expert in that knowledge area, but to have a professor who's understanding the student and what they're thinking about and what matters in their lives. Because that kind of engagement is not just to get a better grade. That kind of engagement is to begin thinking in ways that begin to link what one is thinking about and doing with life ahead. And so, as you say, many of the kinds of services that are now offered on college campuses, take advantage of them, but keep in mind that what really matters is that the student is engaged in that educational experience with other students and with their professors and with mentors wherever they can find them.
Right.
That pays off over one's lifetime.
Right. And, to put another finer point on it is the faculty and staff and et cetera at a typical college, they're there to be helpful, but they're human too. And they tend to gravitate, if they've got a little bit of time and they're going to help somebody and they have somebody that's asking for help, kind of almost by default, that's the person that's going to get the time and the attention because they're there and they're asking. It's not like they intentionally ignore other, it's again, limited resources, limited ability to do what they need to do, just like the rest of the world, right? I mean, as parents, we're crazy busy. We have to make decisions about where we spend our time and money.
Yes.
It's going on the campuses all the time going on in the high schools, your school counselor that's going to help your student pick a college. So they're not intentionally ignoring you, but their office has got a line of people waiting for help, and they just got next. And if your kid's not in the line,
they're not going to get that help. That's right.
Exactly. They're not going to say, "Oh, wait a minute, I haven't seen little Susie in a while. She's not in the line."
That's right.
A lot of times they don't have time to chase kids that aren't asking for help because they're too busy delivering to the people that are asking.
That's right. And I would also say, just thinking about scale of an institution, I mean, as president of a smaller liberal arts college, students would come and see me, and I always made time for them. If I was at a big, and it could have been about most anything. Some of them were about something they were unhappy with. Some of them just were interested in talking with somebody who was looking at the whole institution. And that was a part of the relationships that existed on that campus. A big and complicated institution, probably you're not going to be able to walk into the president's office, but maybe you could walk into a dean's office and have that kind of conversation. And those things each matter and contribute to the benefit that one gets from a college education.
Absolutely. And a corollary to this, it was on a past podcast, but the younger you are, the more willing an adult is willing to help. So if you're a busy hand surgeon, and a kid in grade school or high school says, "Hey, can I shadow? Can I learn something from you? Can I buy you lunch?" They're much more likely to say yes than to the grad student or the 40-year-old that says, "Hey, can I get an hour of your time?" I mean, they will give it freely to a young person that's expressing interest. And it's just the nature of the world, right? I mean, you think about, again, most parents think that way and say, yeah, that's probably true, right? It's like somebody called me at work and said, I'm in high school. I'm thinking about majoring in accounting. I know you do accounting work. Can I come shadow you for a day or have lunch with you?
That's right.
It's so unusual. You'd probably say yes, just to check out the experience.
Exactly.
If a 40-year-old says, "I've been in an accounting profession for 20 years, can I pick your brain?" No. Right. If it's just, it's just not the same.
Not the same. Absolutely right.
So I find that interesting. But anyway, I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you've done the hard work here so that the rest of us don't have to, and then wrote it all down. So if people are interested in your book, can you just tell us the title again and where we can find it and any other way that people can get a hold of you if they'd like?
Sure. The book is The Evidence Liberal Arts Needs. And the reason it's titled that is it's the first objective research on long-term life outcomes of people who graduate, not just from liberal arts institutions, but all kinds of places, and looking at long-term life outcomes, success, living with fulfillment, leadership, civic involvement, and all of those kinds of things. And while not every chapter is designed for parents, it can be read, as the introduction says, selectively, and includes their ideas about how to think about selections of colleges that get beyond the normal kind of prestige or focus on, make sure the student gets that first job, because indeed anybody with a college degree will tend to be more successful. And if they've had the liberal arts kinds of experiences, they will be even more successful and live more fulfilled lives. It's available wherever books are sold, Amazon or Barnes & Noble or your local bookstore, wherever you happen to buy your books. Published by MIT Press, which I thought was fascinating, that MIT Press, with its reputation for being a technical institution, was the one that was interested in publishing this particular book. And so I encourage you to think not just about colleges as a destination. In fact, they are not a destination. They're a bridge to the future. And it's not a short list of institutions that a student should be considering, or if they're feeling disappointment about where they've been admitted to or denied or waitlisted, or there's feelings of pressure that you should only apply to prestigious places, set those aside and really think about the goals that matter for your child's life ahead and where they might best find that. And that's the kind of information that's in this book.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We'll stay in touch.
Good. Thank you, Brad. Good day to you.
All right. That was a great interview. If you want more, of course, you can go and get Richard's book. Again, it's The Evidence Liberal Arts Needs. It's available wherever books are sold, of course. That's all we have for today. We'll see you again next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.